What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Hey, I need to tell you something.
Oh, God, what is it?
Some time ago, we did an ad episode where we talked about how we were going to get better with our ads.
I was wondering where you were going. Yeah. We're so shit at the ads.
That's what we said. We said, we're so shit, we're going to get better, and we just didn't.
We don't. We're so full of shit. All right, well, here they are. We got 5 sponsors currently.
All right, who are they?
First is the OG. The Einzelwiener.
Oh, that knob.
The bullfed.
Yeah.
Nah, he's the OG. He's been with us since the start.
No, he's good.
He is going to sell you whatever you need.
Yep.
He'll get it. What you should do is contact Jason from Ironswick Dog Queer with some peculiar product, tell him you want it, and make him get it in and sell it to you. Even if you could buy it somewhere else. Just make sure he gets it in for you.
Just make that bastard work.
But in all honesty, I'd say 90% of my shit comes from him, and it's all the best stuff.
I did see some feedback on our forum where somebody was really intrigued about your handler package, the one that you got from Jason. Obviously, it works. Like, people are paying attention to the ads. That's great. Even though we're shit at this, we do a terrible job of actually trying to keep things updated. It's great to see that the people who are investing in our show are actually getting some leeway.
Yep. Mate, I've heard that your wife sells some canine products.
My wife is doing great guns at the moment. I said before that she's been supported terrifically in the United States, which has been good, but I will swing that back home and say that so many more people in Australia are doing it. And it's great to see, like, there are people finally in the sporting dog world who are starting to prioritize nutrition for their dogs. And I know them. I can see them when Narelle comes in and says, oh, guess who bought some product off me for the first time. So,
are you saying there's no patient confidentiality?
No, there's patient confidentiality.
Oh, sorry.
It's just a mailing list.
Confidentiality.
Well, it's a mailing list.
Are you aware my dog is taking pee, collagen, and what's the other thing he takes?
Antinol.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been on that.
Antinol is not Narelle's business, but I've got to do a shout out for Antinol. They are absolutely fantastic. They're very supportive of our show. Whenever we've done seminars and so forth, they have been first to dip their hand in their pocket. They are very generous with their product. But let me just say, all that aside, their generosity and their advertising and marketing, let me just say on the other side of that, their product is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it does work. It's very beneficial.
For sure.
It's one of those things where they say Antinol for every dog every day. I totally agree with that. Narelle has even supported that. When people have asked them about her product, she says the 2 things that I would absolutely give to you is Antinol and her Gut Protect formula.
Yeah, right.
Gut Protect is like her holy grail of
like
her
the
whole
flagship
range.
of the range.
This is not me market talking, okay? Because
This is an ad.
This is an ad, but this is not me doing marketing.
But we've already pointed out we're shit at ads.
I know. Of all the things that she sells, and she sells some killer product, but the one thing that she does sell, which I absolutely agree with her, every dog should have this product, is the Gut Protect.
Really?
100%. It's nothing that they need for being sick. It's something that they need to do just to maintain great gut balance.
Okay.
And gut balance is like mental health. It's one of those things that you absolutely want to get control around. So products like Antinol, great for every day. Gut Protect, great for every day. There's other products that aren't even related to hers called Rosehip Vital and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic for dogs to be on every sort of day. But I know there's other people we need to talk about. If you want to learn more about Narelle's products, go to our website, canineseuticals.com. I think it's
You'll figure it out.
It's .com or .com.au. It's one of those.
No one types that shit anyway. Everyone just Googles it and then goes,
just Google it. You'll find it.
Hey, George Kittredge, I reckon we should get him on the show.
We should have George Kittredge on the show. Not only is he devilishly handsome, but he's got a fantastic, one-of-a-kind product that I've never seen replicated anywhere in the world. You and me were getting a car ride by him. We got to see the prototype firsthand.
And then his bike got stolen with the prototype on it.
Did.
Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, George has Rowdy Hound Dog Box. And so it's a crate that goes on the back of your motorbike so that your dog can go everywhere with you. Yeah. It's cool as shit. It's a great idea. You should totally get one. Tailored Canines in Canada.
Yeah.
Do you know that Taylor from Tailored Canines is hosting Jazz Whiting later in the year?
I do know that. Yes, I saw the ad. Very good.
Yep.
Not only is she doing great stuff with her Tailored Canine,
her training business,
but she's also getting a fantastic trainer over there to help with her tailored training.
She is. And finally, Barbara de Groot
The sugar mama from the Heart Dog
From the
Training.
Heart Dog Training.
Just fucking throws cash at us.
Just supports the show. God bless her.
Yeah. I think later on in the year when Narelle and I are over doing a seminar with Melanie Benware, Barbara de Groot is coming over.
Wonderful.
I think she has put down a like, and I said, you better come, sugar mama, and she gave me a thumbs up. So hopefully she's going to be there and I can give her some love to repay us for all the kindness and support that she's thrown at us and ask nothing in return.
All right. That's our ad.
Yeah.
That one's good to go for at least another 4 years. You'll hear from us then. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined in studio today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
You're going to have to put up with me being a little husky.
You are, sir.
Since I got back from the Sunshine Coast, I've had some sort of throaty thing going on, but I'm on the other side of it. I just sound like I've been in the trenches.
We'll carry on.
We'll carry on. We'll be fine.
So we missed a week because Mike Ellis was here. You had a whole thing.
We got that one out during the week.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we got episode 313 out.
Yeah, but we still didn't record for a week, didn't we?
We did miss a week along the rails,
That's right.
because you were in Townsville. And
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was a while. Yeah, that's right. We did it on the weekend.
there was business happening.
Anyway, we're back at it.
We're back. We're here.
So interesting development in the dog world. Before we're going to keep carrying on with these questions because there's a really interesting one next. But I think that something that we need to discuss very briefly is the study that came out just recently. Let me read the exact title of it so that I get that correct. The study is called The Comparison of the Efficacy and Welfare of Different Training Methods in Stopping Chasing Behaviours in Dogs. And it was performed by Anna-Marie C. Johnson and Clive Wynne. And the trainers involved were Ivan Balabanov and another guy. I didn't see his name somewhere. I can't remember what his name is, but it's another guy, one of Ivan's students that lives in the area.
I'm almost scared to have a part in this because it had something to do with lure coursing, and I thought, oh my God.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's hella funny.
When I was reading through the study, I've gone, oh no, my weakest subject.
Yeah. So the gist of it is they did use a lure coursing device.
They did. I was interested that I know that they use the lure course rather than sheep for concerns of efficacy and not efficacy, welfare for the sheep and so forth, but interesting how much more intense it would have been if live animals were used.
Yeah, I was asked specifically on Instagram by somebody what I thought of it. And I put a post sort of explaining what I thought of it. And I'm happy to discuss it. I think what's important to understand, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of content come out about this kind of stuff, right? Like I'm sure that Ivan will do a bunch of interviews on it. He'll probably do a podcast of his own. There'll be more information about it.
I think he just did one with Melanie Uga.
Yeah, that's right. He did, yeah. There'll be lots of other stuff comes out of that. But I think what's interesting is less than the study. The study itself is great.
Well, it finally gives real world accuracy without the bias that, like we've all been saying, how can this be?
Yeah.
Like, how can this actually be? It doesn't make any real world sense based on our visual appraisal when we've been out in the field with dogs and we can see it for ourselves, not just you and me, but hundreds of efficient and acclaimed dog trainers around the world. How can this actually be? And then the study revealed it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, bravo. Somebody has actually done a real study without the bias and without the fluff, and they haven't set it up in an area where it's doomed to fail because there is such a variance with the dogs used and the trainers used and the locations and so forth.
And I think what I take from it is not the gotcha moment that I think a lot of the force-free community are scared of, right? Because the way that they trained the dogs, the non-e-collar group, they only had one session of loading a marker. So it wasn't how you would expect that you would train a dog. If you or I were limited by, no, you can't use any tools on the dog and you have to try and use nothing
What was the marker? Banana, wasn't it?
Banana, yeah. So it was a novel word and it was both groups got the same marker, right? So it was a punishment marker, I suppose, in the e-collar group, and it was the marker for food or positive reinforcement, and in the other group, or the other groups. Long story short, people can read the study, and in fact, they probably should. What I think is super interesting has been the reaction to the study rather than the study itself, because the study itself confirms exactly what everybody knows, is that the e-collar will stop the dog from chasing the lure. And when it's done correctly and timed appropriately, the dog will stop doing that. Yes, The biggest thing that people are upset about.
The yelping?
Yeah, the yelping, right?
I know old mate's been harping on about that and made that his pinnacle point.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what has been super interesting to see is people reacting to that. And that, yes, the dogs did yelp, potentially in pain or surprise or whatever when it happened, but then they're leaving out that it says that like they recovered and that they were okay afterwards.
That was the conclusion. That there was no cortisol changes.
Yeah. And so like there was limited assessments of that, but mostly what they're going by is the body language of the dogs, right? And they were doing potentially, on some of the dogs they did fecal cortisol assessment. And unfortunately, the dog has to take a shit at the place the following day so that you can get the sample. And not all the dogs did that. So like that data wasn't available to them.
Yeah.
But in the observational data by the people doing it is that the dogs were okay. And yes, there's no long term, like they didn't follow them up and see how long they lived for. Like I've seen people complain about that, they've shortened the lifespan of those dogs, all this kind of nonsense.
That is an incredible inaccuracy to say that. I've never known any dog in my life that's had e-collar use just suddenly just peter off because of an e-collar.
Yeah, well,
but then people
argument,
say, well, how do you know?
Yeah, that's right.
How do you know?
That's right. How do you know? And the argument is it's the stress of it like will affect them for the rest of their lives, right? So they're simmering at a lower level at an increased level of stress by comparison to if that hadn't happened. That's the argument. I don't agree with that even in the slightest. In fact, I think it's the opposite because the dog's had its learning moment and then is like, oh, okay, well, if I don't do that, I avoid it. And the evidence actually suggests the opposite, that in that kind of training where there is, when significant aversive is used on a dog and the dog understands how to avoid the aversive, every time it makes a choice to avoid the aversives, it feels reinforced. And so it actually feels like safe and happy when it's in the position of where it had the aversive in the last time, had its learning moment, and then makes the decision.
Of course, it's in control.
Yeah,
this is the mechanism we keep discussing. Once you're in control of something, you feel empowered.
Yeah, and that was explained to me and hundreds of others by Stephen Lindsay.
And Melanie Uda's been discussing it frequently in a lot of the Instagram profiles that she's been putting up.
Yeah. What's interesting to see has been the reactions to this in people saying like, oh, but the positive only wasn't done in the... Sure, that's true. Like that's not how... If you or I were limited by tools and not allowed to use anything, in fact, these dogs have to be off leash, right? And you're only allowed to interact with them via positive reinforcement, and that's food. And you and I would spend a significant amount of time figuring out how to get in that dog's head. We would load the markers to be supercharged. It would take a decent period of time.
And I want the dog super hungry.
Yeah. So we're going to have to do a lot of the things to make sure that our reinforcer is truly a reinforcer in that circumstance. And we're going to spend quite a significant period of time before we would ever approach the trigger, the lure in this case. And I think that any reasonable dog trainer would agree that that's the case. I don't want to speak for Ivan, but I know a little bit about his training, right? I've done his course. I've been through the material. I've watched him train dogs. I know his ethos towards dogs himself. Like there's no way that if he were put in charge of actually training a dog to stop predatory chase and were allowed to train however he liked, there's no way that he would purely just leave that to the e-collar either, right? Because, a big part of when you punish away a behavior is it leaves a vacuum. Like that space has to be filled. And people who have seen the footage have remarked that the dogs that the e-collar was used on, when they then were like, okay, I'm not chasing the lure, but what do I do now, right? Like, because they're looking for guidance. And the study doesn't allow for that, right? Because the study is just isolating the individual components. And that's sort of been a concern that me and you and everybody else has had when you look at these sorts of studies and they say, well, the punishment didn't work. It's like, okay, but how did you do it? Like, was it in a way where the dog could associate it to something? Because a lot of the things that say e-collars fuck up dogs is you'll see where they go, yeah, it's non-contingent use. So yeah, just stimming a dog without the dog finding any sort of pattern into why it's being stimmed is going to fuck up that dog. Like,
and then
no
offering
shit.
the dog an alternate rewarded behavior.
Yeah. So you and I and everybody else that would be training a dog for realsy and is a balanced trainer, first of all, we're going to have all those markers loaded. We're going to have a way to reinforce and interact with the dog repetitively and tell the dog, hey, that's what I want, right? Like do more of that. And this is what I want from you. But then we're also going to be able to say to the dog, like, hey, don't do that, right? What I think is interesting to see is when people are saying like, oh, the positive reinforcement part wasn't done. This is bullshit study because it's not comparing apples with apples.
Well, it was.
That's right, it is.
Yeah.
Because nobody would train like this in either way.
Yep.
This is just an assessment of like, okay, at the extreme ends, which is more effective? And it's like, okay, well, now we know the e-collar one is more effective, and that if you have to stop predatory chase, that's going to get it done really quick. Now, that's not to say that that's how anybody should actually train or get rid of a predatory chase problem.
There's so many more considerations that we would
that a real dog trainer would actually do, which is what
for efficacy to the dog.
Yeah,
and address a lot of those welfare concerns that were raised in some of the online banter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's worth pointing out that the study is just another interesting piece of data that we now have to say, well, no, the e-collars worked. Like the punishment worked and the dogs recovered. And even when they weren't in a position to recover the dogs, they weren't doing anything to make sure that the dog had something to do afterwards, or they weren't filling that space, and they weren't doing anything that you and I might do where like there's a reconciliation at the back end of the punishment. None of that was done. It was just straight aversive stim with the e-collar. In what is the shittiest form of e-collar use, it was effective. And
without real predatory animals.
Yeah, that's right.
It was only a coloured bit of lure.
Yeah, it's a lure coursing that you're an expert on.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, when you consider the increase in percentages, which would probably happen if real sheep were used, you've got to consider how difficult it would be for a positive only response to occur then over an e-collar use.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well. Like the timing of the e-collar was at the time of contact with the lure.
Yep.
And so you couldn't do that in real life because you're not going to let the dog bite the sheep in order to stim the dog for biting the sheep. You're going to do it at the presentation of it, which means that the arousal level is going to be lower. Therefore, the e-collar level will be lower. You're not bound by a study where they need to say, okay, well, this is the training arena, which was fenced. You know what I mean? And so like this is the space. All the dogs are going to have the same opportunity to chase within the same environment, because in real life, you're going to work distance and proximity. You're going to get as far away as you need to be to get the communication working the way that you need to be. Like real life training just happens completely different to the way that it has to as part of the stringent controls of a study. One of the things that's been called for, and certainly I've called for this in the past as well, is we go, okay, we'll get to evenly, like 10 each, evenly chosen
skilled
dogs, right? That dogs that show a similar level of drive and willingness to chase the thing, and choose your champion. Have whoever you want be the force-free person, and Ivan can do the other, right? And let them actually train however they would like to train. You can give them a number of sessions or whatever, but make everybody happy. That's not really a scientific study. That's really a test of who's got better training skills, right? Like it's not going to give us any specific data about like how e-collars work versus not and the outcomes of e-collar. It's going to just be...
But if you had 10 trainers on one side and 10 on another that had varying skills, still within the same parameters, that would give you a much better idea.
Yeah, but it's still like, I think that
narrowing it down.
But with a proper study, like it just doesn't work like that. Like that's too many variables to draw proper conclusions from.
The problem is life always throws variables at you.
But that's real life.
Every dangerous dog that comes in to see me has had so many variables thrown up. From my wife just came home, the door opened, my dog came out, there happened to be 2 dogs walking past. My dog has never shown aggression to dogs before, and then suddenly, because they're right outside the house, they started acting towards my dog. My dog then came out and assaulted the other dogs. In any other situation, that would never happen, but it just happened to be that day. So variables happen in studies, variables happen to trainers. You can almost have an identical situation and think, would you look at that? This variable that I didn't expect suddenly popped up on me. It just happens. It's the way things are.
Yeah. The study itself is interesting. I think it's a great data point that we can lean on when we're trying to figure out how we do things going forward. But what's been way more interesting has been the reactions to it online. And I think because of the findings of it, especially the heading of it, I think that more people have read this than probably read most studies. And I think that quite a lot of people, this is perhaps the first study that they've ever read all the way through in detail.
Well, nobody likes to lose.
That's right.
That's the situation. And one thing I did want to circle back to when we were talking about the efficacy of e-collars is, as we've highlighted before, and I've certainly been around in those days, the old days where we had those old brick Tritronic remote trainers,
Like, they were horrible. And if that was modern day sort of training with e-collars, I'd say, well, you've got a cross to bear on that. But the modern e-collars, the ones that are out today, there's collars that have got like up to, I think, around about 130 levels, you know, and some of them in the smallest levels, you can barely feel anything. Yeah, and I know all the arguments. I've read everything that people have put online. Not everything. I've read a majority of things that people have put online where they said, yeah, but what about the person who just puts it on and cranks it up to the highest level? That person exists in everything out there all the time. That's the same person who's going to roll up a newspaper and go out and bash the dog around the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Or put a pair of steel cap boots on and kick the dog in the ribs with them because they can't control their temper and they have no idea what they're doing. They're the poster child of the assaulter and the abuser that everybody gets upset about. But to tar you, me, and the professional balance trainers out there with that same brush, that's slanderous.
Yeah.
And that's where it's slanderous. And this is where this whole principle of this ideology that exists out there, where people just scream and shout and use abusive, toxic language and expect everybody just to be silent and then repeat what they say. I think I can finally see a light at the end of the tunnel where this is starting to come to an end. I think people now are starting to wake up and say, these people who are calling me a heretic all the time, I'm actually getting a bit sick of them. I'm disappointed with how the hypocrisy that comes out of their lips all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just grossly neglectful of their own community, and it's also slanderous to ours.
Speaking of hypocrisy, let me just confront ours.
Yes.
We're making a podcast right now. This is content and this is relevant stuff and we're talking about it.
Yeah.
We have other things to talk about and we will, but this is in the zeitgeist and we need to talk about it, right? So let me confront the hypocrisy of me complaining about other people talking about it whilst I talk about it, right?
Yes.
Like, acknowledge that. I get it. But what has been super interesting is to see the way that key people, and I'm going to use his name, and I hate that I'm potentially driving traffic to him because we've discussed in the past that's exactly what Zach George wants from all this kind of stuff. But I think something's very interesting is happening with Zach George at the moment. And I think that he is in bad shape. I've been watching, I have to admit, I'm sucked in by it because he's been carrying on about this in really peculiar ways to the point where he's now, you know, as the balance training community of basically like, you know, it's pretty obvious to people who can train a dog. Like, he's not a person whose opinion is relevant in dog training. He's a social media personality and he has to create content, and this has given him the content that he needs. So, like, I get the hypocrisy. We're doing the same thing. We're talking about it right now. I get it, right? But I have been watching him again, which I'm ashamed to do, but I think that he's in bad shape. I don't know him because I haven't really watched anything in the past. I don't really know what he's like very much. But watching his patterns of behavior at the moment, it's quite disturbing. I'm actually pretty concerned because he's just got this dog, right? Like, he's got like a Malinois Shepherd, adolescent dog by the look of it, to try and prove what he can do with it. And I'm concerned for the welfare of that dog. I'm concerned for the welfare of the people he interacts with, to the point where watching him turn on, because balance trainers, in order to play the game of gotcha online, you have to pay the ante. Most balance trainers don't pay the ante, right? Like, we don't buy in on the game because, like, I don't acknowledge Zach George as a dog trainer. I don't acknowledge him as that. So, like, if he were to come after me and be like, oh, yeah, I'll be like, oh, fuck off, dickhead. Like, and I would say that. I'll be like, oh, fuck off. I don't acknowledge you. You're not a person whose opinion is relevant, right? Whereas, like, somebody who, like, considers themselves from the force-free community, like, if Denise Fenzi came after me and said, like, you're doing terrible work, I would reflect on that. I'd be like, well, fuck, you know how to train a dog. You might choose to do it in a really different way that I do. But at the end of the day, you are a person who's capable of training dogs. And I see it, and you're good at what she's good at. Yeah, we've had Denise on the show. She's good at what she does. If she were to say to me, what you're doing is wrong, and, like, you need to reflect on how you're doing it, I'd be like, oh, fuck, okay. Like, I'll have a think about it. But she doesn't do that to people like me because she doesn't think that, right? Or she doesn't vocalize it if she does. Like, I'm not in her head. But to have Zach then, he can't do that to balance trainers because everybody just tells him to go fuck himself. So he's now having to do it to force-free people. What I wanted to bring up, the reason why we're discussing this, is I almost wish that I had the time and space to go back and find the episode. Maybe someone who's listening, you know, there's plenty of people who are catching up on old episodes. Like, people find the podcast, so they're bouncing between new ones and old ones. If you're one of those people and you can find the episode where I say eventually you're not going to be able to be positive enough for these people.
Yes.
Which
yes,
I
you did.
said, we're in that time.
Yep.
We're here. It's happening. And we've got certain people from the positive only community. I want to point out, none of them are actual dog trainers. These are just internet morons. Some of the stuff that they say, it's just ridiculous and totally non-tangible. Like it would never work to train a dog, right? No matter how you felt about dog training, a lot of the shit that you see these people say is just total nonsense.
But they collect an enormous audience, which is the terrifying part of it.
That's right. And so now these people, and Zach has not discreetly, he is overtly attempting to weaponize his audience, and he is asking them to do things like protest at Ivan's seminar that he's doing in the UK and stuff like that, right? His patterns of behavior are escalating to the point where I think there's going to be an event.
Let's break that down a little bit further. Let's say that happened. You know, Ivan goes over there and people protest and then it turns violent and Ivan got hurt.
What then?
What then?
Yeah.
Coming from people who preach force-free and positive only,
Yeah.
these things have got a way of getting out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's interesting at the moment. Like it's interesting to see, and it's what we discussed was going to happen, is that you get to the point where you're not force-free enough.
The other point that I do need to make on this, because it has happened before in other scenarios, is this is where dangerous stalkers start coming out of the woodwork, because once they're weaponized, they think they're doing God's work.
That's right. When you think you've got right on your side, you'll
Yep.
do a lot of dangerous shit,
Yep.
right? I think that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing it pointed at people like Denise. So Denise has had to tell Zach, stop contacting me, stop tagging me in things, stop interacting with me.
Has she sent him a cease and desist?
Or I don't know that it's gone that far, but I saw online yesterday
Yep.
that she has been very clear with him to stop, and he has made it very clear he has no intention of doing that, right?
So
And then-
he's basically saying, I've got no boundaries.
yeah, that's it. Right?
Wow.
And similarly, Michael Shkasha. So let's just be clear about Michael Shkasha. This is a guy who signed the petition. He wants the banning of tools, right?
Yep.
Despite working only in a very narrow field, I have big feelings about this because I have in the past sort of thought, well, it's great because if they're drawn to that sort of training and they don't want to use any form of aversives on their dog and they have an aggressive dog that needs that work, sometimes staying force-free can work if you're prepared to put in a lot of fucking work and you're the kind of person that doesn't actually understand that the prolonged suffering is much worse for the dog, right? Now, fair enough, those people exist. I want them to have a place to go. That's why we have in the past supported Mike Shkasha and been like, yeah, it's definitely a person that we want around in the industry and we want to point our audience at him. But now this is a guy who's also calling for a ban of e-collars, and that's not enough. So because he has interacted with balanced traders, that's now enough to get him canine cancelled by an army of people who are apparently harassing him online. It's such a peculiar time in the dog world.
We called it. We called it.
And
alarmingly, we called it. Further alarming, these prophecies that people have sort of chuffed at us and thought us madmen for us, they're coming true.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing about this. And I remember the days that Alec Jones, my old mentor, was telling me things about prophecies that would come true in the dog world. For example, he said there'll be a day where you're not allowed to dock dogs' tails in Australia anymore. 10 years later, it came true. I'm not going to go down that whole row. I know people are going to throw up a stone about the medical thing and say, well, why would you want it and blah, blah, blah. But that was the thing of the time. It was a right if it was done properly by a vet, like desexing, like taking out the sexual organs of a dog, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
One day they might say to vets, well, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's an invasion of the dog's endocrinology system.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. Do you think that day will ever come?
Yes, I do.
Do you reckon?
I absolutely do.
I think the opposite, because the people who are pushing for this kind of stuff, the people running the agenda, they don't want there to be dogs. And so the more dogs that are desexed, the less there will be. And this is one of the super interesting things. So,
well, that's a good point.
Yeah. So,
and that's probably something that I haven't considered.
Yeah. So I was, we had Sam King on who does therapy dogs, right?
Yes, she does.
Now, her dog, I know pretty well, her lab, Nala, it is exactly what it's meant to be, right? It performs its role perfectly. It does its job exactly as it's meant to, and she's got it trained to a really high level to do exactly what it's meant to do in the therapy sessions with the kids. Now, that's a proven dog. That's the kind of dog for that kind of work should be bred. But there's a big push even within therapy dogs to not allow them to be certified as therapy dogs unless they're desexed. And then the question is, but then where does the next therapy dog come from?
That's an amazing observation, truly, because I have said that about government dogs before, where some of the most amazing dogs that have been offered around in some of the biggest and most prolific programs, the dogs are desexed.
Yeah.
And you think, what's the point of having some of the most amazing bloodlines only to make them vanish?
Yeah.
That's the end of the career for those dogs.
Yeah, putting a hard stop to it.
Getting back to what we were talking about before with some of our antagonists in the industry, the problem I see, which I've pointed out before, is I just see them as a business.
Well, that's what it is.
And that's the issue, is that people keep looking at the person, but I think what we really need to look at is you're looking at businesses who, when their stocks are down and when their shares are looking like they're being dissolved, that's when they get so much more aggressive about things. And I see it mainly these days when the finances are starting to come down. That's where the aggression really starts to come out. This is where the desperation really starts moving in. Because if you're in somebody's way and they've got no alternative but to keep making money and they need to see their profit margins moving up instead of leveling out or, God forbid, decreasing, they want to do everything in their power to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's really the role of any business. Like, you own a business. We've got a business. And you know yourself, you never really want to see your business just sort of leveling off. Like, that's almost suicide of a business. So at that point, you've got to really reshuffle your deck and think, what do I need to do to make my product more attractive to market?
Yeah.
And I'm just seeing that happen. So what I'm seeing is businesses who aren't dog trainers, they're just businesses. That's what we keep saying. These people aren't dog trainers.
Yeah.
They're not in it for the efficacy and the welfare of dogs. They're in it for their own financial profits.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the very interesting things. And I know we've talked about this and I know people are probably sick of it, but it's like...
It's going to keep coming up. No matter how many times you and I decide to talk about it or not to talk about it, it's our future.
Yeah, so one of the things that Zach in his wild rants was saying the other day is he points out that he doesn't charge anything for his content, right? Like, he doesn't actually train anybody's dogs. He doesn't charge the public anything, is what he said. And that his revenue is all advertising based. And I thought that was the most insightful thing, because I know that. I've been watching, I see you. Now, let's sort of tease that apart just a little bit, right? We have advertisers on this show, right? We ask people to contribute to Patreon. They're welcome to. They get a giant backlog of content and we put new stuff in there all the time for $3 a month, right? And I do a live stream once a month there where I answer questions for 2 hours and it's $10 to hear that, right? So, like, yes, we have an income from this, which, as we've been super clear about, like, it just buys all this cool shit that we're talking into.
We're very transparent about it.
Yeah. We have never taken any money out of it ourselves. We pay our tax. We buy cool shit, right? Like,
that's right.
That allows us to continue to make the podcast and more content going forward.
And when people have come around here and seen, you know, like our deck, they've said, oh, that's a cool little studio setup we've got. And I've always said, that's because our Patreon people have purchased this, which, once again, we're 100% transparent about that. And we never have not been.
Yeah. And it's been wonderful for us because we've got all this cool shit. And then I've got a full setup at my house as well, or at my work now. Yep. And so that if I can't get to here, we do it that. Like, so we make money. We use it to continue to make the show, but we do make money. I want to acknowledge that.
Yep.
But our advertising, right? We're not beholden to any of our advertising because, for starters, we're capped at how many we can take because I don't want to be fucking doing ads. We're so bad at it. We've been advertising. Poor George, his business doesn't. He died a month ago, and we're still the ads still ran numerous times. Like, that's how bad we are at that, right?
Yeah.
And so, and if you were to actually look at how much we could charge, the going rate on a podcast is $25 per 1,000 listeners per show that you would do.
We undercharge people massively.
Ridiculously.
Yep.
Like, it is ridiculous because that's not how we make our money. You and I have jobs, right? Like, we have real jobs. This is not, we're not trying to make a ton of money from this, right?
All we wanted to do was just, like, have the podcast be able to pay its own way.
Yeah. So on Instagram, and I'll be transparent about, like, my business because I've done this in the past. I don't care. Like, everybody should know this. And if you don't realize this, like, come on, where have you been? I post all this stuff. I've got a guy that at club, everybody knows you got to run that camera. It's got to be filming the whole time because I don't like to film any of the sessions of people who are paying me, right? But what I say to everybody at club is that none of you are paying me, right? We're all here for free. One of you can be on that camera the whole time, right? Everybody's got to keep that camera going. And then from that, one of the guys in the club turns those into reels for me and I post those. And the whole point of those is that I'm showing, hey, I know stuff, right? And not only do I know stuff
you're
how
creating
to,
a funnel.
Yeah, not only do I know stuff about dogs, I'm good at teaching it. And if you want, go to the link in my bio. You'll get on the email newsletter. I've got an automation that will send you 8 emails, and email number 4 and email number 7 will try and convince you to try and buy my online course.
But we've done entire episodes on this.
Yeah.
And where you've entirely told people how to do it themselves.
Exactly. But so the point is...
But you are a real dog trainer.
That's
Pat.
right.
That's the thing.
But I sell my information.
Yeah.
So we give tons of it away. We do that on here. There's loads of people. We get emails every day about people saying like, oh, we've given heaps of information that's been helpful to them. We get these incredible feedback, which I love getting. And even from the information that I've put on for free on Instagram and other places, I've had people reach out and be like, that solves a problem. Like you filled a gap. I've had people troll me on YouTube because when during COVID, when I couldn't do the normal things I was doing, I tried to develop a new skill set and made like vlogs just for the process of doing it. I had people like, oh, what do you think, you're a fucking filmmaker? I'm like, yeah, I was like expanding my knowledge. And what I do know about is dog training. And what I was learning about is making little films. And so I thought, well, I'll make them about dog training while I do that because I was doing an online course and most of those videos I was making were my assignments that I was doing for the fucking course. But so the point is, I have real information. All of the social media that I have is the funnel to say to people like, hey, I've got real information. You can buy it curated from me. Never once on the show have we said, oh, I'm not saying that because you have to pay for that, right? We give everything away. But if you want curated information, if you want it laid out in a proper course, then you got to buy that from me, right? In the same way your business here, you guys actually train real dogs. You've got people coming in, you train the trainers, you train the dogs. Like it's a real business that actually turns over because people go, hey, I need a board and train, and you got the dog here for however long you have it, and you're actually providing the service of training the dogs. That's how most people are doing their online. But Zach explained he doesn't do that. He's just advertising revenue. And the thing is, those advertisers just want to see eyeballs. Right? That's all they want to see.
That's what I'm saying. It's a business.
Yeah. It's all they want to see. And so I am fucking guilty of it because I've been watching his bullshit. I've been watching him melt down online because I'm a little bit sickly fascinated by it, I have to admit, right? Because I'm watching him becoming more and more derailed with his Team America World Police disguise beard. Like he just is like I think because he's under the pump from his advertisers who are like, hey man, you used to, because he's got 3 million something followers.
But that's what happens in businesses.
Yeah.
That's what happens when the board of directors all get round and say, hey, where's our shares, man?
Yeah. But he's not incentivized to provide good content. He's just incentivized to provide content that makes people look at it.
Yeah, but
and he's doing that awesomely because I'm fucking obsessed with his content. I can't look away.
Yeah, but you look at Radio Shock Jocks.
Yeah, it's the same shit.
Some of the people that we've got in our local network of free-to-air radio, I mean, they're just appalling people.
Yeah.
They're bullies, thugs, and just their ire and their tempered, horrible fucking dialogue that they just spew toxic fumes into the air. And people chomp it up because people love miserable topics.
Yeah.
People love scandal.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my big rant about it. I'm so ashamed of myself for watching it go down.
Well, I'm not because I can't stand it.
Yeah, you're not watching it?
No, I'm not.
I can't help but
I watch some. Well, when I say I'm not watching it, I watch some of the small reels that people occasionally put up. Like if it's people that I respect in the industry and they're saying, hey, you should see this because this is the type of diatribe that's getting thrown around in our industry. And you kind of watch those things and you think, oh, that's just disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just disgusting and appalling that somebody could lower themselves to the level.
But you see people engaging with him. Like there's people
and
making...
And it was you that pointed that out to me and the rest of our audience a long time ago. Like, it's just a business.
Yeah.
This is a business person doing business.
Yeah, desperately.
Yes.
Desperately doing it.
Yeah.
But I think like you see people making reply responses to him like there's a fucking hostage video. Like they're asking for their own ransom. It's disgusting to see people do that, right? But I can't help but look away because it affects us, right? It affects us heavily. And as I said, it's getting to the point now where even people like Denise Fenzi, of course, Denise, she speaks her mind. So she's come under fire from the force-free community before, right? This isn't her first time around having a bunch of people sent at her.
Funnily that you say that, because I'm sure I read in a comment that Denise considers herself a fence sitter.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I thought I saw in a comment, I could be wrong, but I thought I saw in a comment that she considers herself a fence sitter between the two practices.
I shouldn't speak for Denise. I don't know. And
nor should I. I'm only, like I said, I could be wrong. And Denise, if you happen to listen to this and someone sends you the soundbite, correct me if I'm wrong. But
yeah.
No,
my understanding, like certainly my understanding of Denise and her training, and having watched a decent amount of it, I watched her do a lot of training with that dog Dice. I watched most of the training that she did with him. I think she definitely errs on the as force-free as possible within real training. You know what I mean? Like that's where she tries to lead. She doesn't use any tools and tries to avoid using aversives wherever possible. But she's not the kind of person that won't lift a dog off the ground to stop it attacking another dog. And that's why she gets attacked by people who are the fucking lunatics. Like I watched her tell a story the other day about a dog that was having a seizure, and someone else let their dog walk up to and interfere with the dog having a seizure because they didn't want to put tension on the leash to stop the dog from, they weren't going to resist the dog, take away its free will. If it wants to go and interact with the dog having a seizure, it can.
That's the most insane thing I've heard.
Yeah, well, these are the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And she was saying the same thing. She was saying that's totally fucking unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, so that's my take on that. And to be
Where
clear,
did we go so wrong in this world?
Oh, mate.
Just look at the culture that's exploding around us.
This is the thing. It's monetized. And I think that's the problem.
No wonder people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and so many of these other people, no wonder they just look so bewildered when they're confronted with people that just come up with some of the most odd.
Yeah, well, how do you respond? When somebody says, I'm not going to impose... I'm not going to take away my dog's free will. If the dog wants to go wherever it goes, I'm not putting tension on the leash. At that point, you have to go, oh, right, you're a fucking ridiculous person.
I just don't know what's left for us anymore. We've got to I think we've got to the far left of ridiculousness.
In many cases,
I don't mind a spicy discussion. I don't mind having, a bit of dialogue, and I've actually learned something from it before. In the past, when I was younger and a little less mature, I've probably thought, some of these discussions are just stupid and fucking insulting. But I've kind of looked at it more so that some of the discussions are helpful to actually know where you can improve your own standing sometimes. But we're beyond that now.
Yeah, in many cases we are.
It's sort of like someone hit the hyperspace button and, we leaped into another galaxy of ridiculousness.
In many cases.
Everyone's feeling it. You can just tell when you're seeing these clips and alternate ones online, when you look at the comments people are posting, people aren't holding back anymore. They're just saying this is fucking horrendous.
Yeah, ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. We just got to planet stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's when you're saying I'm not allowing my dog's leash to go tight. I'm not restricting my dog. I'm not stopping it from doing anything. You have crossed the line into moron. You're a ridiculous person. You're not a person who can be taken seriously in any way, shape or form.
Was that anybody of notoriety?
No. It was just a story she was telling. It was a live that I was watching.
Isn't it frightful that somebody – imagine the coaching that must have gone into that person – for them to feel that was the right thing to do. And that's not that person's fault. That's very coaches.
Well, that's the thing.
Right. It's layered back.
Yeah. That's where it comes from. And that's why this is relevant, is because
there's apostles that are working this.
And an indoctrination. So, Zach on Instagram, on YouTube, he's got more than 3 million followers.
Yep.
On Instagram, he's got close to 500,000, right? 400-something thousand.
Yep.
And now, let's say that at least probably 100,000 of them are people like me, because I don't follow him, but I look him up, and people like me going, what the fuck, right? As they're watching it. But even if it's a quarter of the people who are like, hell yeah, I'm bought in, that's a huge number of people who are now being indoctrinated to go out and, sent against not people like you and I. Zach George is an extremist on one side, right? An actual extremist in a ridiculous way. And he's not weaponizing people against extremists in the other direction, right? He's not going after that. He's not even getting his people to go after reasonable balanced trainers like you and I. He's got them going after
his own...
After people who are
his own tribes.
Yeah, one notch away from ridiculous, from like from where he is. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, get them. So it's like, holy fuck, like it's madness. It's insanity. And I know people are sick of hearing about it. And frankly, I'm sick of it happening. I'm sick of myself looking it up every fucking day and watching it go down, just like mortified at what's happening. I can't believe like how it's going down. But you can tell by the look in his face, and you can tell by the way that he is becoming more and more desperate and saying more and more outrageous and ridiculous things. All right, well, maybe we've had enough of that.
I think so. I think it's time to cap off on that. Otherwise, we just get sucked into the vortex of you know being in the same boat. But I will say that at least you and I have had some bravery to talk about these sensitive topics, because a lot of people just won't. They dance around it. And I think sometimes in this crazy world, I see things that people are labeling brave. I think brave is still having free speech, regardless of this outrageous cancel culture that exists around us. The truth is not widely accepted anymore.
The truth is an interesting thing. It requires a point of view, and like objective truth is kind of hard to get to the bottom of. But even reasonable discussion, we're losing.
I've found of a large part of my life, if I express disappointment or annoyance with somebody directly to their face, you're never appreciated for it. If you lie to them and you use mistruths, usually you're very widely accepted for it. So you're rewarded for being a liar and you're punished for telling the truth.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable concept.
Yeah.
Most people feel that, how do I mediate this situation? And what they arrive at is it's better to exist as a liar amongst fellow liars than it is to tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Difficult.
Well, I'm going to try and not talk about that shit again for at least a few more episodes.
Until something else
Until
happens.
something more ridiculous happens, which, like I said, I feel like a climax is coming in this situation. I feel that something is building.
It started a war. Like a war has begun.
Yeah, which is not ideal. There's real wars going on in the world. Like
yes, there is.
real, actual people being killed in the streets, having their hips blown off by pages.
pages.
Real fucking wars happening. And it's a big, like the world has bigger problems than dog training fucking method wars. Like it's just kind of ridiculous. Anyway, I'm gonna try and keep my shit together.
We digress.
Let's talk about some dog training.
Okay, let's do that.
We got an interesting question here, right, from Joshua Morgan. And he says, hey, Pat, when considering deprivation as a spectrum, from something like skipping a dog's breakfast before work to more extreme examples like extended crating or starvation, how do you determine the right level of deprivation when priming a dog for a trial? How far can you go down that spectrum to maximize performance without risking any negative consequences? So I want to go first on this one, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Because he says, hey, Pat, I would never do that prior to a trial. To be clear, my dog eats from a bowl. He has done that probably for, he's about to turn 8, and I'd say it's been at least 5 years since he's just been eating all his meals from a bowl, right?
Yep.
Because he's not a super highly food-driven dog, and I did a lot of shaping with him, but once he knew everything, we sort of reach a point of diminishing return on using food as a training modality. But I often won't feed my dog breakfast if I were going to trial that day, not in the slightest because I'm trying to bring
Prevent
more
your dog
arousal.
from shitting on the field too.
Well, not just that. He's going to shit when I tell him to shit before we go on, and I'm going to control all of that. But like, I don't want him having a meal in his guts while he's running around doing stuff.
Yep.
And so to be clear, my dog eats twice a day. I would prefer to not feed him that, but he gets the hunger spews. If I don't feed him by about 10 in the morning, he starts vomiting bile, like a lot of dogs do that are used to doing that. So I feed him in the morning.
We're
just a
the
small
same.
meal.
Like we do the same thing.
Yeah. And so when I trialed just a couple months ago, I fed my dog because I knew my thing was going to be in the afternoon. I did feed my dog in the morning. But at other trials where trials start at 8 o'clock, right? And if you're going to be on the field between like 8 and 9, I'm probably not going to feed my dog prior to going onto the field because I just don't want him having food in his guts while he's doing the kind of crazy shit that we're asking him to do at a trial. So I wouldn't do deprivation of that, but that's me and my dog. I think that talking deprivation in training, so it's such a spicy word. I think it's going to like trigger a lot of people. But Josh he says it interestingly here. He says, when considering deprivation as a spectrum from something like skipping your dog's breakfast before work to more extreme examples like extended crating and starvation. So I think all of us as trainers have probably told clients, don't feed the dog before I get there.
Yes.
Right? Like
yes.
all of us have at some point asked clients not to do that.
Yeah.
And, I have one of my earliest training memories was turning up to someone's house. Like when I first got out of the army and like one of my earliest paid clients, turning up to these people's house. And, there was the main issue that the dog ran out the door. It was just a cute little cavoodle that had a lot going on, right? Like it was just a fun little dog. The main issue they had with it was that as soon as I opened the door, it would run out the front and they were worried about running into traffic. And when I walked into their house, the dog's bowl is full of meat, like raw chicken. Like it was just out in their house. For starters, what the fuck? But also I remember saying to them at the time, I was like, hey, like you haven't left me a lot of leverage points here. Right? Like your dog is very satiated food-wise because there's raw meat laying around that he's not eating. Like these little training treats in my pocket. When you now tell me he's not food motivated, I'm like, yeah, no shit, right? So in that instance, you tell the people like, hey, in order to train with food, you can't give the dog free food. And so that's, step one on the spectrum that Josh is talking about here, right? And then I think it goes all the way up to people that do deprive and keep a dog, like he uses the word starvation. For me, I have put dogs in sort of tricky positions where they have to earn food, right? Because these are stressed dogs that not even stressed dogs. I think one of the best example I could give was I had a lady come to a seminar one time. It was a 4-day seminar and she's got a working spot. It's one of the first days, but the seminar, like all of them, is in a dog training facility, right? It's in like a daycare. The day before, probably 100 dogs had pissed on the floor where we were training. And the dog, I'd seen video of the dog. He had really well charged markers and he worked really well for food. And when the lady brings him into the training area, clicks, no response, offers him food, no response, because he's interested in other shit. He's got more going on. So I said to her, then it's like we can up the value of the food, which I reluctantly agreed to, right? Like, okay, if there's better food, let's get it. And then it's like, oh, but can we go outside? And I'm like, nah, we're offering him food. We're not withholding food from this dog. So we're offering him food and he's not taking it. So what we're going to do is to make progress in this regard, you're going to be first and last every day for the next 3 days. And we're going to offer the dog food. And on the afternoon of the third day, he took the food. And as I said to her, like, don't feed him at home because the issue is he knows that like he gets fed at 5 o'clock and gets trained at home. And so his willingness to work outside of that space is not there because he's like, I will get the thing later on. I don't need it. I can not take that food. And there's no way to say to the dog, like, no, man, like I need you to take it here because we're training. He has to find that out. So for me, for sure, there's been times where I've said to people, don't feed the dog before I gets there so that we've got like some sort of leverage over the dog, right? He wants the food that I have and we can get straight into training without having to spend a lot of time trying to build that motivation. And then similarly, I've said to people, offer the dog food. And if it doesn't want it, that's it. We're not going to force the dog to eat and we're not going to lower the standards that we want so low that the dog will eat. We're offering the food here. Now, if a dog were fully fucking stressed out, now I would be like, okay, maybe we'll try and find a way to reduce the stress to the point where the dog can eat. But if the dog's just interested in other stuff because he's got other stuff going on, it's like, no, I'll eat later on. Well, then there's no really other way than to be like, hey, I'm not feeding you, right? So I think that it is an interesting topic in that deprivation is a sliding scale where it can be as simple as don't feed the dog in the morning through to including don't try and compel the dog. Don't make it so easy that the dog will eat. Make the dog show interest to take the food all the way through to something that I would, never play in, which is like seriously withholding food from a dog. And one of the reasons I've never done that, and I lose my nerve, like if the situation that we're putting a dog in to try and get it to take food, like that one I'm talking about where the dog just wasn't interested is I'm busy sniffing the ground, I'm doing other stuff, like no nerve issues, the dog's totally fine. I lose my nerve on that at like the 3-day mark. I've never had it go past that. I've never had a dog not eat after 3 days. But I wouldn't allow for that even if I were faced with that situation. And this is totally anthropomorphizing. I know that, but fuck, that's life. Is that I've done extended fasts myself and you hit a point where you're just not hungry anymore.
You know, there's allegedly a study that Rodney Habib famously pulls up where a dog wasn't fed for something like several months or something.
It was 100-something days.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah. It was an incredible amount of time. And I actually need to cite the study because it's
so outrageous it seems like bullshit.
Yeah, but I don't think he would pull it up without
that's right, yeah.
without citing it. But he's talked about it at a lot of online content. I think he talks about it in the Forever Dog, and when I've seen him in conference and so forth, he's used examples of that. Not that we want to do that, and I believe that he said that the researchers were using supplements in the water and so forth that they were giving the dog. But nonetheless, the dog wasn't actually given solid food for, something like several months or something like that, and still managed to jump over a fence and escape.
Yeah.
Incredibly, what's the time for humans where you can go without food for? It's an incredible amount of time. I think
it's huge. It depends on your fat reserves.
Yeah, it depends on fat reserves.
And how much supplement you can take.
I think the issue is for us often when our sodium levels plummet after a period of time when all we're drinking is fresh water. So I think the supplement side of things is a huge thing. But if I can weigh into this conversation, one of the areas that I think that we've got to consider when we're talking about deprivation, and deprivation shouldn't be used as a dirty word. It just describes the reduction of something that would be normal.
But it's a triggering word, which is...
There's so many triggering words. Like every fucking somebody's triggered by something differently these days. But nonetheless, if I'm thinking about my own dogs, because I have put some thought into this over periods of time when we've talked about it, and I've made comments before like, the best dog trainers feed from treat pouches and blah, blah, blah. I too feed from bowls for convenience, but when I was doing comp work with Randy and we were getting ready for PSA, I was only feeding him from a treat pouch. All of his training, because I was shaping so many behaviours and I had him out frequently, he could get everything from the treat pouch. So his entire meal was delivered in 3 sessions.
Yeah.
We'd do treat along the way, and as he jackpot, I would just dump his food out on the ground.
Yeah.
And he'd eat all his food. And he was happy. Or either that or he just mobbed me in the pouch and he'd just scoff everything there. So he got everything he wanted. When we're talking about preparedness, I think what we've got to look at is how do you get flow state from your dog where you don't drive them into the anxiety level or the melancholy level.
Yeah.
And that's primarily where I think as trainers we need to focus on how do we develop flow state with our dogs.
Yeah, totally.
So flow state, as we've summarized before and more intelligent people have spoken on this topic than I have, my understanding of it is you want to develop that state of mind where time is not so linear anymore, like you're attracted to everything that's going on around you because you're in a good state of mind.
Yeah.
Like it's almost
entirely in the present moment.
Entirely in the present moment. Like time has stood still for you.
Yeah.
Like you're in a good state of mind, you feel good about everything, you're not feeling those peaks of anxiety, and you're not also so grossly overfed that you're now melancholy because you just feel like, oh, what's the point? I don't need to do this. I feel that that's what you need to get used to your dog is where does that level lie? Once I've done that with my own dogs, I know with Mando, once he reaches a point, he's basically like, yeah, fuck you, I'll go off and do my own thing now. So well and truly before that happens, I get him in flow state. I know when he's ready for that because he comes up and pesters me. He basically walks over like a little child and starts tugging at my pants and saying, let's do things.
Yeah.
I know through my preparedness of him that I've got him to a point where he says, I want to do shit. Now, if you watch the videos that I'm doing, which are just shit things that I've put on Instagram, and it's only a few little clips that I've done with him, he's not wearing any tools or any devices like most other good trainers do. It's not magic. It's not unreal. It's just bare basic stuff.
Just shaping behavior.
Just shaping behaviors. But he's ready. And the reason he's ready is because I have deprived him to the point, and he's eaten. Trust me, he's eating. He's got a sustained level of food. But I usually tell Narelle, like nights that I'm going out to do bite work out in the shed or whatever, I always tell Narelle, don't feed him during that time. Because I don't want him to get bloat. I don't want him to get sick or have a digestion issue while he's doing a lot of heavy work and he's puffing and panting at a great speed not. And Rottweilers are synonymous for GDVs and things like that. So you got to be careful. But the other reason is because I want him ready for work. And he is. He's bumping away when I get his harness out, he is literally chasing me around the run to hurry up and get it on him and get my shit together. And I know that I've got him in that flow state of mind. I know I've prepared him right. So your job as handler, owner, trainer, whatever it is of the dog is to know what that looks like in the dog and help your client prepare for it. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. You know what? It gives me cause to think like we're often drawn to those super food motivated dogs, right?
Yeah.
Now, What do you think is the difference between a dog who is super food motivated, one of those like bottomless pit dogs, versus one who's not very food motivated and therefore is deprived a little bit to increase that food motivation? Like, do you think they feel internally the same?
That's a really good question to know.
Because that's something I think about a fair bit, because I've got one staying with me at the moment, a dog that is an insatiable eater. He'll eat and it just goes forever, right? Like he shows no sign of being full no matter how much food you give him. And there's no sign of, like, he doesn't dip as he gets fuller. And I certainly haven't withheld any food from him because I'm doing tons of work with him and he's totally bought in on everything that he's doing. And I'm only using the food to do some shaping with him because I'm trying to force him to think, right? I'm trying to teach him to use his brain. But I sometimes look at the way that he is like, oh, food, yes, I'm definitely in on food. Whereas like my dog is like, nah, like, all right, but I'd rather play with the ball, right?
Yep.
I wonder if you were to then say, okay, well, I think it's cruel to not feed your dog for 2 days prior to training, which I don't know that I'd call that cruel, but I wouldn't do it. Is that any different from purposefully breeding a dog that always feels hungry?
Yeah, it's a hard question to accurately answer. And I think sidelining that, I'm confident that we've had multiple discussions of it before, but I really feel that there's plenty of times where we focus too much on the food aspect and not really on replacing it with another form of motivation.
Yeah.
I've heard you talking about it. I heard Michael talking about it quite a lot, making one of the core principles. It's a motivation issue a lot of the times that we can't get our dogs working.
Yeah.
And we need to find out what that is. And in the past, I've talked about Dom, who's one of our people here. He had a husky that he couldn't get it to work. The only thing that he found to get it into the shaping exercise was chasing little feathers. So once we replace the concern, because we do become concerned and overwhelmed by food, we think, food has to solve and answer all the problems for us. What we also have to consider is sometimes we deprive dogs of play or attention or things like that. If we're focusing solely on one area and depriving in another area, then we're sort of cancelling out some of the issues sometimes. So what I think we need to look for more is, what is it that we really need to supplement the dog in? Like, if it's not going to be food that's going to help me develop a relationship with the dog, what is it? And be a little bit more exploratory of that. In the past, people have said, and Bart has said this, we need to not focus on using too many different types of foods with dogs. I think for a lot of the pet market, you do. You have to explore a lot more deeply than some of the dogs that will widely accept bits of kibble and so forth. We have to accept that some of these dogs might need bacon and they might need some cooked chicken or something like that if you want to have a look into it, because there have been plenty of dogs when I've gone round to their house or they've been in here for lessons with me or board and train programs, they won't take kibble. They got no interest in it whatsoever. They're basically looking like a kid turning up its nose to broccoli. But you offer them something like a bit of dehydrated tripe, changes the dog's entire attitude.
Yeah.
So the dog will basically go from zero interest, and I did this the other day 3 times with 3 different dogs. They weren't one after each other, but 3 dogs that I was having issues with. The owners brought their own meals. The dogs were a bit overwhelmed. Narelle has some Ziwi Peak dehydrated tripe that she just buys in, and we use it as treats for our own dogs. They love it. They go insane for it. So I brought it out. I had it in my pocket, offered it to the dogs, instantly took the food. And then you could start to see the motivation levels increase with the dog. So I think sometimes we've just got to be a little bit more exploratory and accept that, yes, it's inconvenient to have to hunt around for these types of things, but the essence of being a crafty dog trainer is digging deep, like being an investigator and investigating.
And novelty maybe plays a role in that as well, right? Like if you're just interested in something new in a new place, it's likely to take it. Yeah, I think
that's a good point. Novelty, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a sliding scale. Depends on the purpose of the dog, depends on how necessary is it that I get this training session done now versus tomorrow. There's a lot of different variables that go into that, I think.
Well, there's also a lot of dogs whose head's on the execution block over some pretty insignificant shit like this, which could be solved with some proper investigation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, oh yeah, for sure, right? Like if it's like I need to get this training done now because this dog has very problematic behaviors and I need to teach it the right thing to do, then at that point we're investigating whatever the fuck will get it done.
But you know the wonderful thing for you and me? We're balanced trainers. we can reach into a toolbox.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
The other day I had a dog came in and the handler said to me, I can't get my dog to drop. I said, tell me your history with the dog. Who have you been to? What have you tried? And they said, I've been to other trainers, which I've heard before multiple times. You heard it. There's scores of other trainers that have been out there. And I said, well, let's do the same thing. Let's try other food. Let's lure the dog. There are some dogs that just get so overwhelmed by the environment they won't do it. So I suggested guiding the dog. We did it. Hey, presto, it worked. There's other things that we can do that we just can accept that there's more than one way to solve a lot of these problems. We don't have to be so overwhelmed that if food won't work for me in one instance, it's all over.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's not. We never used to use it in ADT. We didn't know, like it really wasn't one of our core principles back then. And there were thousands of dogs that went through the program and did it well. And most of those dogs were guided in positions. Had my way again and knowing what I know now, I would have definitely gone back to shaping and guiding with food. 100% I would have. But that was what we knew at the time.
Yeah.
None of the dogs suffered from it.
Yeah, it worked great.
I mean, we're talking about dogs that were strong, powerful, and aggressive dogs. And I never got bitten in the face or attacked by any of these dogs when I was doing most of the heavy lifting for people. So I know the topic is deprivation. I know it mainly focuses around food, but depriving a soul of something isn't just about food. It can be love, it could be affection, it could be play, it could be family, it could be time, it could be whatever it could be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So, I think Josh's final question here, he says, how far can you go down that spectrum to maximize performance without risking any negative consequences? And I think the answer is that depends on you and the dog.
Yeah.
But if you're going into trial, don't do anything that you haven't done in training.
That's a good point.
That's my answer.
Yeah, and I think that's where, and I frequent this point quite a bit, is know thy dog.
Yeah.
Part of your relationship of traveling through time with your dog, you really should know everything intimately about your dog.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, then you have to question why you got the fucking thing in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times that people just don't seem to have the answers for the dog, and then they reach out to a trainer and the trainer helps them establish a relationship. Bravo. That's the right thing to do. But if you're not prepared to do those sort of things, then you've got some soul searching to do.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of times where people, if we walk through welfare agencies or rescue centres and we see those lineup of dogs, they're the recipients of those problems.
All right. Well, your voice has fallen apart.
Yeah, it is.
Your sickness is creeping in. All right, can we wrap it up there?
Good place to leave it.
That's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm. Sorry for my whinging about Zach George. It has just been driving me crazy. I'll try to be better in the future. If you like the show, tell someone in real life, leave a review.
Help our stocks rise.
Yeah. Help us get more listeners. We need them.
Yep.
Because I need more followers. I need them. So do that. Like, rate, share.
It's kind of like watching Alex Jones on InfoWars.
I think about that every time you say your mate Alex Jones. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think you're talking about Alex Jones.
No, not InfoWars, but yeah, old mate sounds a bit more like Alex Jones these days.
Yeah, he does. All right, so do that. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is Patreon. Jump into there. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information. As well as
That's our big money
Yeah.
funnel.
That's how we make the dollars.
Just keep tipping the dollars in.
Yeah, give us all your cash. But you could if you wanted to. You could.
And we appreciate the people who do.
We love it.
Yeah, it's amazing that after all this time, there are still a loyal group of followers that tip a small amount of money in.
Yep, and buys all our shit.
Yep.
All right, so do that. Oh, get some shirts. Get some spring. Get some of that in you. Rep our merch.
Tapestries.
Yeah.
Use one as a cape. Like put one on and just wear it proudly like a cape.
Yeah. There you go.
That will piss the people off at the dog sports clubs who talk badly about us.
Yeah, so if you go to your club wearing our shirt and people say you can't come, well, you're probably fucking doing something right.
Yeah, just wear it as a cape instead and say, well, I won't wear the shirt. I'll wear my tapestry cape.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get in touch with us, best way to do that is jump in the Facebook discussion group. We're going through a bunch of questions at the moment. Our next few episodes are going to be still us answering all these tons of questions that we got in there. So you can jump into the Facebook discussion group. That's where we group source a lot of information.
Yep.
You can ask information of people. There's really good discussions happening in there all the time. If you want to get in contact with us directly, just shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.